Hi, I'm Allie Roberts, and I'm here today at Quyle Kilns with Pamela Quyle. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Good morning,
Good.
Allie.
Thank you. Uh, what brought you into this new branch of your enterprise, glass?
Well, for a long time at Quyle Kilns, of course, we make pottery, and I've always been telling customers that come in that clay is basically glass with a lot of extra dirt in it, because it's the silica that is glass, and it's a silica that bonds the dirt, so to speak, in clay together to make pottery. And then the glaze that we put on the outside surface of the pottery is basically glass also, although we color it with ground minerals. So having said the word glass all these years, I started thinking to myself, gee, wouldn't it be cool if I could do glass right along with my pottery? Oh, that should be simple. I'll just put it in the same kiln. And so I thought, well, I'll give this a try.
So, how long have you been in the glass business?
Well, I've started about 4 years ago, but since I'm self-taught, it's been taking some time before I really felt that I had a product that was worth selling. So 4 years, and then we've been making jewelry full-time for a year or two.
Oh, cool. Do you make the jewelry?
No, I have a partner in crime, Denise Guyton, who works on the jewelry end, and then I'm doing more of the dishware end. So we work together on on lots of projects, but that's mine versus hers. So I'm doing most of the flatware.
So, you were self taught. What inspired the glass besides experimenting? Did you have any influences?
Well, of course, like anybody else who's in the art world, you see
Yeah.
people like Dale Chihuly and think, "Oh my gosh, how could that ever happen?" And I'm just intrigued with that whole idea. And I've always liked glassware, and I've been to several. When I was a child, I went to glass blowing factories with my parents down in Mexico and watched that happening, and thought it was fascinating and beautiful. And I just thought I'd see if what I could accomplish on my own here. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Would you like to show us? I'd love to see like how
Yeah.
everything works.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of fun
Uh,
trying different things. So I'll step aside and look at the glass on the back table.
Okay.
Okay.
So Pam, you say you specialize in flatware. How do you start, or what is the process from the beginning?
Well, luckily, I'm not trying to work with liquid glass. I am working with glass that's already been uh, created in a kiln and formed into a flat sheet of glass. So I'm basically working with something that's a lot more like window glass rather than working with a glory hole and melted glass or blowing glass. So what I'm ending up with, or what I start out with, is a flat sheet of glass. So glass can either be transparent, like the window glass that we're used to seeing, or it could be a dense solid color or a semi-transparent color like this beautiful red.
And how are the colors put into
Oh,
these
okay.
flatware?
The colors in glass work the same way that we get colors in all ceramic materials. So we are using the manufacturer is using the oxides of different metals. So you have, in order to make anything that's blue in either glazes or glass, you're going to be using the mineral cobalt as an oxide added to it. And if it's green, it's most likely going to be copper. If it's a red glass like this, it could either be copper or it could be gold,
Can
which is
you
why red glass is more expensive.
can you mix the gold and the copper to create different colors, or how do you do, let's say, blue or?
Yes, the manufacturer can mix cobalt and copper together
Uh,
to create a blue-green,
okay.
the same as you would, and it's a lot like when I'm talking about pottery and glaze making, I'm talking a lot about the same thing as cooking. I'm using recipes. The glass manufacturer is doing the same thing. They're using recipes, but instead of using flour and sugar, they're using oxides of metals and silicas and materials to make them flux, like
So
a
you
calcium.
add a little bit of this and a
A
little
little
bit
bit
of
of that.
that, and you
Two
get.
very tight recipe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this works out well that I could just get the end product, and I can actually go shopping then for beautiful glass at a glass store, which is just a wonderful thing to go
Yeah.
do. So I can purchase glass that has striations in it,
Oh wow.
solids. Here's a turquoise blue green piece, and that's going to be obviously done with either chromium, copper, and cobalt, or some variation on those
Do you
things.
have a particular color that you like to use more
Well, I'm
so?
always partial to peacock blue, and my whole world's in that and cobalt. So once I have the glass decided that this is what I'd like to use, then I have to think about what I want for an end product. So generally, what I'm doing is called fused glass. So I'm taking two pieces or more of flat glass. I'm cutting them to a circle, an oblong, a square, and then I'm taking that glass, I'm putting it on a clean kiln shelf, and I'm going to melt it into the kiln, and so I will fuse the two pieces of glass together and make a nice round edge on them so that they aren't sharp, and so that I have a thicker glass, safer to handle than and not quite so delicate.
Is it hard to cut glass? I would think that it would just shatter.
You actually don't cut glass, you scratch glass.
Scratch.
And then you convince it to break where you've scratched it. So it's a learning curve. It's something I have struggled with because I didn't have anybody to demonstrate it first. But you learn. And it's not difficult. I've taught kids how to cut glass. You just have to assume that there will be blood. There, there will be burns, but those are minor
Little
details.
cut and scratches
Little cut
here
and
and there.
scratches, yeah. So once I have made my blank, is what I'm going to call it, which is at least two pieces of glass that I have fused together, rounded the edges in the kiln. Then I want to be able to decorate the piece, and I can either do that before the first firing or after. Either way works fine. And so, for example, on a piece like this, I've taken the same semi-transparent blue glass.
So this piece of glass
Was the other half of
into,
this.
Wow.
Except that I've fused a piece of clear onto it also. And then I have used more glass as a paint to make a decorated design on this. So I've used actually a gold luster, and I've used a black paint, and then I've fused one more piece of glossy cutout to make a little dragonfly in the center. So this piece has two firing processes and a decoration and a third piece that's fused into it.
Do you use different glass for the decoration, or do you use the same glass?
You can go either way. And so let me show you some of the different things that you can do, because they're all there's so many different ways to deal with this product. It's really cool because you can figure out what works for you or what looks good. So, for example, let's start with, this is a piece of broken scrap glass. I'm using as much recycled glass as I can, and this was my friend's coffee table at one time, or a part of it. And so what I added to this piece of clear glass was little bits of glass that are called large frits. And so these are little pieces of transparent glass, and you can see that I've melted them onto this clear piece and layered them above and below each other and melted them all together. So this is one decorating technique that you can use. So you can basically do this like a mosaic, where you could put as many pieces of glass as you wanted to, like a patchwork quilt or a mosaic, together, and you can fuse those and melt them together. So that's one way to handle materials, and there's lots of different colors for that. This is a piece that's actually another company, it's Annie, but they've used a gold luster and painted it onto a piece of fused glass and fired it. Actually, there's a third firing project, but this is just a painted design melted onto the glass.
When you paint your design on, do you have to fire it again?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, if you want it to be food safe. You could paint anything with acrylic paints, but it's going to wear off in time, and if you put it in the dishwasher, it's going to wear off. Whereas if it's fused onto the glass and into the glass, it's as permanent as a pottery glaze. And I like making things that are more permanent. So this piece, for example, is a fun piece. It's a combination. I've used two pieces of clear glass. I've painted a design on the bottom piece. I've added little bits of frit, and then I've encased the whole thing with the top piece of glass and melted that, and then I've slumped it with a second firing into a mold to make it shaped like a dish. So I've used a lot of different possibilities on the same piece.
So when you are making a dish, do you have to manually mold the edges up, or how
No.
does that happen?
So the first, we make our flat blank, decorated or not, and then you very carefully, you have to wait till the kiln is absolutely the same temperature, room temperature, but then you can take the pieces out and you can set them onto a mold, and you can make your own molds out of clay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's very convenient. So right down here I have molds. So these molds are made out of clay. These are a bisque fired, a low temperature fired piece of pottery. We've drilled holes in the bottom of the piece so that as the glass starts to melt and slump down inside the mold, it has to push the air out.
Oh, wow.
So you have holes in the bottom so that the air is forced out, and then the piece will slowly melt into the bottom of the dish. And then you want to stop it at that point before it continues melting into a puddle, just like you do with pottery. So here's a piece that's a good example of this. This was a round cut piece of glass. I set it onto this mold, and it conformed then to the shape of the mold. So that's how I got the ruffles in the piece.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
What color glass did you use?
This is a really pretty little transparent piece. It looks a lot like carnival glass. When I realized how much work I had put into it and think it looks just like a commercial piece, I go, oh gosh, I should have done something more with it. But it's a commercial glass. So working with these things, like I said, we have a flat fused piece of glass, and then I can choose what I want for my end product. So I can choose, for example, to make this little piece, I used small bits of glass that are like spaghetti hairs. And
that doesn't even look like glass.
But yeah, they're just little itsy bitsy teeny skinny hairs. And then I would lay them onto the glass. And when I fire it, they're going to expand a little bit as they melt into the glass, and they'll give me the colored design and an abstract design. So these two pieces were made in that fashion.
I love the abstracts. Are there specific colors that you use together?
Black and white and red is always attractive.
So this is frits, right?
Right.
And
So frit is any kind of a glass or ceramic material that's been handled by people to prepare it for your use. So instead of just using ground copper ore, we're using a green glass that's been made with copper, but it's been fritted for my use. So basically, this is powdered glass. So on some pieces, like this piece, my decoration is done by making a stencil of the leaves, and then I've used a powder, the frit, and literally just sprinkled it through a stencil.
Do you think that this gives it more texture than paint?
It does give it more texture, and I can also add one color on top of the other and blend them. So it's an interesting way to work. So then as I lift this, you can see that I have a leaf on the glass, and I'll actually hold it in place with hairspray.
Really?
Yeah.
You just spray a little bit of
hairspray
Aquanet?
on it. Yep, Aquanet is exactly it. So that works really well. So I can work in that fashion using a stencil, or as I did with this piece and this piece, I simply delicately laid the powdered frits into position and basically painted with them. So instead of painting with a liquid, I was painting with powders that I was just sifting onto the glass and then melting into place.
Oh, wow.
So that's one technique. Then we talked about painting. There are paints that are designed for glass. So you can purchase paints in any kind of a color. And basically, this is the same kind of a product that you use for china painting. These are very low temperature and handle very much the same as a commercial glaze. So you can paint this with a brush or use the squeegee bottle itself to use decorate
What
with.
temperature do you blow or do you
Melt the glass
melt
with?
the glass?
So much lower than ceramics. That was a real surprise to me because I'm firing clay product at around 2,400 degrees. This is 1,000 degrees lower. It's basically red hot. I'm firing it around 1475, 1485, depending on what I'm doing. So it's a much lower temperature for melting glass.
Is it easy? Will the glass crack easily if it's too hot?
The glass cracks so easily that it's just amazing. With pottery, you have so much more leeway that you can open your kiln when the pots are 500 degrees and take them out. I set the pot holders on fire. The pots are fine. With this, oh, no, no, no. Everything has to be exactly back down to room temperature. And with glass also, you need to do annealing in the process. So you will take your glass up to the temperature that you want to do the melt, then you drop the temperature down rapidly, they call it crashing, and then you hold it and you anneal the piece just like you're annealing metal for strength. And so glass that we think of like tempered glass and Corning ware, those have very specific annealing points. With the large pieces, I have to be very cautious and do my annealing. With the small glass jewelry, not so much. It's pretty forgiving.
How long does it take to anneal or to?
The firing's going to depend on, the firing time is going to depend on the size of the piece and the size of the kiln. So each one of those is individual. For small pieces in a small kiln, you could be talking about an hour of temperature going up and 5 hours of cooling. In my large kilns, I'm talking about a day going up, 24 hours probably taking it up in temperature, and maybe 36 or 48 hours of cooling time.
Oh.
So, and I don't even peek into it.
These pieces are wonderful. How did you do these?
Sure. This is another, I'm using recycled glass for my original blank on here. So I cut a piece of window glass, and now I've used up all the old glass that was sitting around here, so I'm actually buying glass, which is nice. And then I have added to this and melted onto it a dichroic glass. And dichroic glass is a fairly new product in the glass world, and it's quite gorgeous. And we're mostly using it for jewelry. But in this case, I cut pieces. They were compatible with this window glass. I fused them together. And then once again, what the next firing level was to slump it into a mold and make it into a dish shape.
How do you know if glass is compatible?
So you were asking me about glass compatibility. And I think one of the ways I can show that is just to talk about the fact that I'm using recycled glass, like glass bottles that I can melt. These pieces are stained glass that I'm melting, and I'm putting into wind chimes. Actually, Denise Guyton's made these. And I'm using the dichroic glass for jewelry. Well, all of those glass all have different compatibility, and they can't be used together because everything in the universe expands and contracts ever so slightly. If you put two things that don't have the same expansion and contraction together, they'll break apart. And so if I put a piece of bottle glass together with a piece of window glass, they would eventually break into little itsy bitsy tiny pieces, and sometimes in a week and sometimes in a year, but always.
So is this a recycled bottle that you have used to?
Yeah, to make these melted glass bottles. That's what they are. They're melted glass bottles. And I've had people come in and say, how did you crush that flat? I'm going, well, I didn't crush that flat. I melted that flat. Because it's glass, it'll melt flat. So I just lay it on its side, take the labels off, obviously, lay it on its side and melt it flat and add a high temperature wire on it. And then the design that's on the surface of this is likewise done with red frits that I sprinkled on.
Okay.
So I cut a pattern and sprinkled them in place and fired it a second time.
Okay. And so with these plates, the dichroic, it's usually used for jewelry?
It's usually used for jewelry. So I'm using a little bit here on this window glass because this particular type is compatible with window glass. But generally, what most people use dichroic for is for dichroic jewelry. So I'm working with my partner, Denise Guyton, on all the jewelry. And she does all the jewelry. But I can talk about it. So what we have with dichroic glass is a glass that has a microscopic layer of a metal, which is vaporized by laser, and then under vacuum, and pressure is coated, the glass is coated with it. So most of these glasses are simply a textured glass, and then they have different metal coatings on them. So each one of the metal coatings then refracts light in a different way. So as you move this piece around, it can refract from purple in one direction, yellow, green, turquoise, magenta, all these different colors all on this one piece of glass depending on how the light's hitting it. So it's a lot of fun to work with. And you can take a piece like this and put it over another color, and it's going to pick up a different
Wow.
color system than it did by itself. So we can choose then to use a background of a colored glass, a white glass, a black glass underneath. So with the glass jewelry, we're basically making little, another cooking reference, we're making little canapes. So we'll cut a little piece of black glass and then put a piece of dichroic on the top and a piece of clear on the top of that and maybe a little glass on the top of that and put all those things into the kiln. Glass likes to always melt to the same height. And so as you melt it, it'll melt down and spread out, and it always likes to be about a quarter of an inch thick.
So one side won't get larger than the other? Or
It will all even out.
It will.
And occasionally they slide and do strange things that we don't expect. And we aren't entirely sure when we put these in the kiln exactly what we're going to get with each piece. So there's a lot of serendipity in it.
That must be exciting to see what's going to happen and not really know.
It is so fun. Some pieces we can be fairly sure when Denise made this, she had a real clear thought in her mind that it was going to have a red flower with a center on a green. However, that's not the case in a lot of these. They're just a lot of fun because it's like opening the kiln and you go, oh, look at that. And each piece is just so interesting and spectacular and different. We just can't hardly believe it. It's just so much fun.
It's like a cocoon, and then when it comes out, it's like a butterfly. You really don't.
Absolutely. We don't have that good a handle on it. And I don't think you can, because each piece of glass works differently. And where you place it in the kiln has a factor, how many layers you're putting in. Every one reacts to the other one differently. So as you stack more pieces on top of each other, each one interacts with the one below it and above it. So it's a really fun process. So we're making and selling this glass here at our pottery. And we also sell in town at the Sierra office, and gifts have our glass down there too.
I bet your jewelry collection is amazing. You're always wearing great jewelry.
I have more fun with this, and it's so nice because Denise and I both figure we get the pick of the litter. And since I've got a magpie in my gene pool someplace, I like sparkly things. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun with this. That's another good reason to be making it.
Do you guys make pendants or earrings more? What do you prefer?
I think most people, we probably sell more pendants than anything else. But anything that we can come up with in terms of stick pins for gentlemen, earrings, tie clasps, bracelets, rings, they're all fun to do. So probably we sell more pendants.
Do you put the jewelry together as well? I see that you have a clasp.
Yes. So we're going to be either melting a piece of high temperature wire in between the glass in the kiln to attach it together, or we'll be gluing it onto a pre-made silver or gold back. So these sort of things we buy from a jewelry supply company.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So what was the process like with the glass to make, say, this or this?
So a piece like this has 3 parts to it, essentially. We have a black base, another layer of dichroic glass, which is a blue that flashes to turquoise and pink, and a 3rd layer of glass on the top. And this piece was not melted into a very liquid state. It was stopped when it was still what we call a tack fuse. So it's a little more geometric. You can cut glass and keep it geometric, but a piece like this, for example, is very similar. It's a piece of green glass with dichroic and a clear over the top, but it was melted into a rounded state. So you can make some decisions about how you want your piece to end up by how high you decide to fire it.
Okay.
And each one's, and this would be another example of a tack fuse. So these pieces are quite evident that they're stuck together rather than melded into a single entity.
How long does it usually take to fire
A tack
this?
fuse,
Yeah,
we're only
yes.
talking about 10 degrees difference in temperature and literally a few moments, 5-10 minutes difference.
So you have to be
And you
on
actually
it.
look into this inside of the kiln, and you can judge what's happening. You can look at the pieces. You use an eyeglass, dark glass, but you can look at them and make your decision.
So where are you located again, Pamela?
yeah.
So we could.
Our Quyle Kilns, we're 3.5 miles above Murphy's off of Highway 4. You actually have to come up our driveway. So you can call, and we're here except on Tuesdays, but it's always a good idea to call in case I'm out on delivery or don't hear the phone. So our phone's 728-3562, and we're in the book, but we'd love to have you come up and see the rest of our shop, and I'm happy to tour you through.
Thank you very much, Pamela.